Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Old and Word Books. Not a fantasy book this time, not even really weird fiction. This is We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, a sort of psychological thriller, sort of a horror book, very domestic feeling of book, of story. I've read two Shirley Jackson books before. I've read her collection, The Lottery and Other Stories, I believe is the title. Really good, for the most part really good, especially the titular story. I've also read The Haunting of Hill House, of course, her more famous work. I didn't really respond to that as much, I didn't enjoy it as much as We've Always Lived in the Castle. We've Always Lived in the Castle is one of my favourite books actually. I read it in 2018, maybe I think it was December 2018, and it's one of those ones where I regret not starting this review channel earlier, because obviously ideally I would have read the book then instantly done a review of it so that my memories were fresh. It's been quite a while now, of course. December 2018, and that's just such an inspirational book, really. I love the feeling of it, although of course this review is going to be more impressionistic. Obviously the further back I go, unfortunately, although I do a bit of research and refamiliarise myself with the characters and the plot, this is going to be a fairly impressionistic review. That is to say, I'm not going to be dwelling on too much of the details, it's more about the feeling of it. So, I really enjoy Shirley Jackson's stuff. In this book especially, it's just phenomenal. The character of Mary Blackwood is really a sort of a... what would you call it? I guess it's just she's just inspirational, I suppose, for my sort of short stories that I write. The feeling of the book in general is very sort of, has that eerie quality to it, the weirdness. It's got a lot to do with otherness and seclusion and isolation, and this is very much a sort of, it's probably the best example I can find of this. The one I read is the Penguin, the Modern Classics version. The cover isn't too great. I read it on Kindle, but the cover for the Kindle version isn't too great on mine. It's just a house and a sort of night sky. There's a really good illustrated one that shows more of the character of the book. It's Merricat, which is the nickname of Mary Blackwood, and Constance, her sister, on the cover. And there's all these sort of weird villagers staring out at us, the reader. It's a really good cover. I wish I'd got that. Anyway. So this is Shirley Jackson's last book, written I believe in 1962. She died in 1965. So really, I think it was for most people the sort of pinnacle of Shirley Jackson's writing. So I'm just going to give a couple of quotes here. So I read this a fair while ago now. I saw on a Discord channel I wrote in 2018 in December. I've read 26 of the book in one sitting, which is quite a lot for me. 26% of the Kindle version. Very intriguing book. I don't even know how to feel about it. Not that it's hard to read. It's more just a result of the subtle psychology going on. I read that the author is a master of controlling information flow, and it seems like that. Very surreal sort of book. The book is about three of the Blackwood family living in an isolated estate, and they're hated by the villagers. This is me just talking to a friend. It reminds me of something. It's got a sort of American Gothic vibe to it. So I'll just give a bit of a blurb, of course. Living in the Blackwood family home with only her sister Constance and her uncle Julian for company, Merricat, Mary Blackwood, just wants to preserve their delicate way of life. But ever since Constance was acquitted of murdering the rest of the family, the world isn't leaving the Blackwoods alone. And when cousin Charles arrives, armed with overtures of friendship and a desperate need to get into the family safe, Merricat must do everything in her power to protect the remaining family. This is a very secluded book. It's actually a TV series as well, which I haven't watched. I probably won't watch it. Might ruin the feeling of the book. It's a very secluded. It's almost a traditional Gothic not haunted house, but a sort of, well, in a way, a haunted house, especially near the end. I'll get to that at the end. Feeling of a book, but sort of transmogrified into a sort of domestic American urban environment. You see what I mean? So it's like The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe, but in a more sort of 1950s domestic style. That's what I'm trying to say. And of course it's Shirley Jackson. I believe she herself said that she writes the same story every time. I believe she said she felt quite down about her writing sometimes, where she always wrote about the same, in some way or form, about otherness and people hating other people and that sort of thing. The sort of domestic squabbles and racism and that sort of stuff, especially in her short story collections. There's always a sort of negative element brought out from towns and villages. So I'm just going to read the very first paragraph. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. This should give you an idea of the feeling of the story and the characters. One of the reasons I love this book is that the voice is phenomenal. It doesn't feel faceless. It's not robotic or technical. It's first person, so you really get into the character of Mary Blackwood's thoughts and feelings. She says, "I am 18 years old and I live with my sister Constance. I've often thought that with any luck at all I could have been born a werewolf, because the two middle fingers on both my hands are the same length, but I've had to be content with what I had. I dislike washing myself, and dogs, and noise. I like my sister Constance, and Richard Plantagenet, and Amanita phalloides, the death-cup mushroom. Everyone else in my family is dead." So that's a very intriguing, that catches you, it really catches you. Actually, I think Shirley Jackson has a way with openings. The opening to The Haunting of Hill House is, I can't quite remember it off the top of my head, but I remember it being very sort of intriguing as well, about the feeling of haunted houses, I think. But yeah, there's some really interesting and almost foreshadowing little points there that hint at the story to come. I like my sister Constance, Richard Plantagenet, Amanita phalloides, a death-cup mushroom. Everyone else in my family is dead. It's really it catches you from the very first couple of sentences. So really, the conceit of the story is fairly straightforward and simple. It's one of those books that there's not a lot that happens, but it's all about the psychology, and it's all about the subtle feelings of character and the sort of thoughts and feelings. It's about, so there's a murder mystery, of course, as we've learned from the beginning, and we're not sure how the Blackwood family died. We just know that there's Merricat, her sister Constance, and her ailing uncle Julian, who live in this old decrepit family home, and we learn over time that Merricat is a sort of almost the dominant figure. Although she's the youngest, she's 18, and I believe Constance is maybe in her mid-20s or 30s. She's the one that goes out and interacts with the town. You see, Julian is ailing and fairly near death, I suppose. This old sort of uncle of Merricat and Constance, and so he can't do anything really. He's writing memoirs about the incident, so he's sort of obsessed with the incident, and he's writing about that. And Constance is fairly agoraphobic. She can't go out at all really, and she sort of relies on her younger sister actually to do the shopping and get books from the local library. So there's a really feeling of dependence, I suppose. So I just want to read a quick passage just to give you an idea of Merricat's sort of, and Constance's, I suppose, worldview or just mindset about the town. Because of course, something I perhaps haven't mentioned is that the town, let's just say, are somewhat prejudiced against the Blackwood family. They believe that Constance was acquitted of murder because Merricat wasn't at the banquet, the Blackwood family banquet at the time, so it must have been Constance, except she was actually acquitted. But they still hold on to this idea, and it's become a sort of local legend in the town. And there's even a sort of childhood rhyme that everyone says. I'll get to that later on. It's a really sort of memorable, iconic part of the book, where they just constantly drill into these characters. You killed someone, you murdered someone, and they don't let them. They're always trying to push or keep the past with them, I suppose. They don't really forgive them or anything. It's like a really hostile environment, this town that they live next to. So this is what Mary Blackwood is feeling as she walks through the town. It was a fine April morning when I came out of the library. The sun was shining and the false glorious promises of spring were everywhere, showing oddly through the village grime. I remember that I stood on the library steps, holding my books and looking for a minute at the soft, hinted green in the branches against the sky, and wishing, as I always did, that I could walk home across the sky instead of through the village. That last sentence was actually inspiration for a story called The Fall of Austell Gren, which is a short story that I wrote once about a Victorian gentleman artist who falls from the sky. So yeah, it's a very inspirational book for me in various ways. So really good, just brilliant voice as always with Shirley Jackson's stuff. So really, all I'll say really about the plot is that there's a sense of control that Mary Blackwood has, Merricat has, where she's actually, there's a really good sort of, almost like a witchy, occult element to the book, which is what makes it stand out for me, I think. It's really in line with Shirley Jackson's other stuff, especially Lottery and other stories. There's some somewhat more magical or hinted magical elements in those stories. Merricat is a practitioner of sympathetic magic, where I believe she's hiding dolls in fields and nailing books to trees to try and help and protect the family home and help Constance as well. It's really good. She's got all these little secret hideouts and groves and whatnot beside a river. Really good. You get a feeling of the sense of where this house is and her sort of need to control everything. And that also helps with the sense of otherness as well. This distinctness from the town and the sort of the weirdness of these characters. And Merricat especially, she's 18, but she seems a lot younger than that. She's almost like childlike in a way. It's a very interesting characterization. And so eventually, halfway through the story, we have a sort of disruption event, I suppose, where Charles, an estranged cousin of theirs. So Charles, he says he's trying to look out for the family and relates to them, I suppose, but he also has sort of monetary motivations and whatnot, and Merricat is at once distrustful of him, whereas Constance sort of likes him. So there's a sort of dynamic there, there's a sort of challenge, so Charles feels like a challenge to Merricat, I suppose. So really good sort of character dynamics. It's all about character, this book. So of course I won't give any of the details about the ending away. I'll just say that it's almost like an excellent, I've written here, an excellent sense of an origin story for a haunted place, of legendary characters by the end. This feeling of they've almost, Merricat and Constance have almost entered into this sort of language, I suppose, of the town. I'll leave it at that, I think. As for the negative elements to the story, none that I can really say. That this is a very solid story, but I think when I was reading the analysis, there were certain things I didn't catch on. Various feminist themes and there's a lot of symbolism with cooking and whatnot. I didn't really respond to that as much, but that's fair enough. It's just nothing really wrong with the story. I just didn't really catch on to that at the time. So I think I'll end. It's a fairly shorter review. Just want to keep it more vaguer, more of an impression, really. I think I'll end with this quote again near the start, but again it highlights the feeling of sort of the central conceit and the feeling of this book. We've always lived in a castle. So Merricat they called, Merricat, and moved all together to stand in a line by the fence. I wondered if their parents taught them, Jim Donnell and Dunham and Dirty Harris leading regular drills of their children, teaching them with loving care, making sure they pitched their voices right. How else could so many children learn so thoroughly? Merricat, said Connie, would you like a cup of tea? Oh no, said Merricat, you'll poison me. Merricat, said Connie, would you like to go to sleep down in the boneyard 10 feet deep? So they have that's sort of a repeated rhyme, a sort of hostile jabbing at Merricat as she walks through the village or the town, and they'll basically never let this this tragedy go. They believe that Constance has killed the family and she got away with murder, and so they're always trying to make fun of them, I suppose. And then at the end here, Merricat says, I was pretending that I did not speak their language. On the moon we spoke a soft, liquid tongue and sang in the starlight. Looking down on the dead, dried world, I was almost halfway past the fence. So I highly recommend the book. Of course, not the typical fare of this review channel, but it's brilliant. I highly recommend any work by Shirley Jackson. Really, I might plan to read Dark. I think it was another short story collection, Dark Tales. Maybe Hangs Them In as well. Various other books. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the review. Probably George MacDonald coming next. Quite different, but just trying to keep it varied. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.